It was late autumn, the kind of chilly evening that made the streets glisten under the soft glow of old street lamps. I remember walking down that narrow road in downtown Boston, leaves crunching under my shoes, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. At 58, looking back now, I can still feel the same nervous energy I carried as a young man of 23, walking to meet her, the girl who had promised to change my life forever. Her name was Eliza, bright, fearless, with laughter that could echo across an empty hall and make it feel full. I had met her in college during a late-night study session at the library. She had borrowed my pen first, then laughed at the way I stammered trying to return it. Something in her smile stayed with me, even when we walked out separately into the cold night. That evening, our first real conversation had stretched for hours under the dim lights outside the campus cafeteria. She spoke of dreams, of traveling to Italy, of writing a book one day. I barely spoke then, mostly listening, watching the way her hands moved as she talked, how her eyes sparkled with ideas. It was October 15th, 1988, when we made our first real promise. I had just completed my summer internship and was about to return home to Vermont for the holidays. She was staying back in Boston for a part-time job at a publishing company. We stood on the edge of the Charles River, the water reflecting the orange hues of sunset, and I remember saying to her, "No matter what happens, we'll find our way back to each other." She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes serious despite the gentle curve of her smile. "We will," she said, her voice firm, holding my gaze. That moment felt eternal, a simple promise, yet one that carried the weight of everything we were too young to understand. The weeks turned into months. Letters became our language. Phone calls were scarce. This was before smartphones, before texts. Every letter I received from her, I read multiple times, holding the paper close, memorizing every word, every comma, every smudge of ink. She spoke of her new apartment, her colleagues, and small triumphs at work, and in every word, I felt her presence. College ended, and life demanded decisions. I moved back to Vermont, took a job as a software engineer, and worked late nights to save money. Eliza was still in Boston, pursuing her dreams in publishing, sending letters and postcards filled with small sketches, snippets of poems she loved. I remember one postcard vividly. It was a tiny drawing of the Charles River with the words, "Meet me where we promised, someday soon." I tucked it into my wallet, never letting it leave my side. Our parents were cautious, mine practical as always, worried about the distance, the uncertainties. Hers, protective yet gentle, encouraged her to focus on her career. Neither of us had fully realized that love, though strong, needed endurance, patience, and sacrifice. Spring of 1989 came, and with it, the first real test of our promise. Eliza's father fell ill, and she had to move back to her hometown in Maine to care for him. Suddenly, the distance grew heavier, the letters less frequent. I remember sitting at my desk in Burlington, staring at the river outside my office window, tracing the lines of her last letter with my finger. "I'll return as soon as I can," she had written, "but you must promise to stay strong, to wait." I did promise, and I meant it, but waiting is harder than any test I had imagined. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into coding, into projects that required focus, into nights that felt longer without her laughter filling the spaces around me. Yet every Friday evening I would walk to the small bridge near my apartment, imagining her walking beside me, just like that October evening when we made our promise. Then came the letters that carried worry. Her father's condition worsened. The words, though hopeful, were heavy with fear. I remember one particularly difficult letter. "I don't know how long this will last. I hope you understand if I can't write as often." The paper trembled in my hands, and I felt a cold ache settle in my chest. I wrote back, assuring her that I was patient, that our promise was still alive. But nights alone were longer than the words could fill. It was during those lonely nights that I realized the depth of our connection. Love was more than shared laughter and promises. It was endurance, trust, and the belief that someone else's soul is intertwined with yours across miles, obstacles, and years. I would read our letters again and again, memorizing every curve of her handwriting, every affectionate sign-off, every little doodle she had added. And then, one evening in late July 1989, I received a letter that changed everything. It was thick, heavy, unlike the usual notes. My hands shook as I opened it. Her words spilled out in a mix of excitement and fear. She was coming to Burlington. She had decided to return, to see if our promise could survive the years of distance and the trials life had thrown our way. I felt a rush I cannot describe, a mixture of hope, fear, and anticipation. I had waited months for this, and now, the reality was just a train ride away. I cleaned my small apartment, nervously pacing, imagining her face as she would appear at the station. Would she recognize me? Would the distance have changed us? These questions haunted me as the hours ticked by. And finally, when I heard the distant whistle of the train, my heart leapt. I stood at the platform, breath catching, watching as the doors slid open, and there she was. Eliza, carrying a small suitcase, her hair slightly longer, eyes scanning the crowd until they found me. We didn't speak at first. We just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting the years fall away like autumn leaves in the wind. And then, slowly, she smiled, the same smile that had first held my attention in the library. My heart, after 35 years, knew the same rhythm it had known in that moment long ago. The train station smelled of coal, oil, and warm bread from the small cafe near the platform. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the tracks. I remember gripping my suitcase handle tightly, though my mind barely noticed the weight. Every step I took toward Eliza felt like stepping into a memory, a dream I had nurtured for months during the long distance. When she finally reached me, we didn't hug immediately. Instead, we just looked at each other, measuring the years, the miles, and the silent longing that had grown between us. Her eyes were still as bright, though a few lines had appeared around them, life's gentle reminders that time had moved on. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "Eliza, you made it," she nodded, biting her lip as if to stop herself from saying too much too soon. "I promised," she said softly, and in that instant I knew every lonely night, every aching letter, every moment of uncertainty had been worth it. The years melted away as we walked out of the station together, her hand brushing mine in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. We spent the evening walking through Burlington, talking quietly about the months we had spent apart. The streets were familiar, yet strangely different. New cafes, freshly painted storefronts, but the river, the trees, the very air seemed unchanged, as though the city itself had been waiting for us. Over dinner at a small local bistro, we revisited our old conversations, laughing at the little misunderstandings that distance had caused. Yet beneath the laughter, a tension lingered. Eliza had changed. Life in Boston had made her independent, ambitious, and sometimes blunt in ways I hadn't expected. I, on the other hand, had grown quieter, more cautious, shaped by the patience and solitude of our separation. The differences were subtle but real, and I realized that the promise we had made, though sacred, would be tested in ways neither of us had imagined. That night, walking along the riverbank, she stopped, her eyes reflecting the golden streetlights. "Do you remember what we promised?" she asked, her voice a mix of challenge and nostalgia. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Always, no matter what," she smiled, but there was a hint of worry. "It's harder than I thought it would be. Distance changes people, and life, sometimes faster than we realize." Her words lingered, echoing in my chest. I had anticipated joy, reunion, relief, but fear had crept in alongside them. We were no longer the same young dreamers who had made that promise by the Charles River, yet the heart remembers its own. My hand found hers, holding tightly. "We adapt, we make it work," I said, trying to reassure both of us. The following days were filled with a blend of joy and adjustment. We revisited the places that had mattered to us, the little bookstore near the river, the old cafe where we had spent hours studying together. With every familiar street, the memories flowed back, mingling with the present. But reality had its own demands. Eliza had obligations in Maine. I had responsibilities in Vermont. Time, though elastic in memory, moved rigidly in the world around us. One evening, as we sat on the porch of my small apartment, she revealed something that shook me deeply. I can't stay long," she confessed. "My father's health is failing again. I promised him I'd be there." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had hoped that this reunion would finally let us breathe together, uninterrupted by distance or duty. "How long?" I asked cautiously, trying not to let my frustration show. She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. "I don't know. Maybe months, maybe longer." The weight of those words was heavier than any winter snow. Our promise had endured letters, calls, and separation, but now it faced a different kind of trial. Could love survive when proximity was impossible? Could promises made in youth withstand the pressing realities of life? We spent the night talking, not just about love, but about our fears, ambitions, and regrets. Every word was deliberate, measured, as though we were trying to balance our hearts against the burdens of the world. And in the quiet of the night, beneath the dim porch light, we made a renewed vow, not just to wait, not just to remember, but to fight for what we had built in memory, in trust, and in unwavering belief in each other. The days that followed were bittersweet. We shared moments of laughter and quiet companionship, but the looming absence hung over every decision. Eliza had to return to Maine frequently, and I often found myself standing by the window, watching her disappear into the distance, counting days until she returned. In those moments, I realized that love was not just about joy, not just about shared moments. It was endurance, sacrifice, and patience. It was the willingness to let go, to trust, to hope, and above all, it was the courage to believe in a promise that was tested by time, distance, and circumstance. One rainy afternoon, as we sat on the couch watching the droplets race down the window pane, Eliza turned to me and smiled softly. "No matter what happens, We'll find our way back, right? I reached for her hand, holding it firmly. Always, I whispered, echoing the words of 35 years ago. And in that moment, despite the challenges ahead, despite the uncertainties of life, I felt a profound truth. Love that survives distance, that endures time, that faces trials without breaking, that love is unshakable. And so began the real journey, not just the reunion, but the test of promises made long ago, a journey of trust, endurance, and the quiet determination to honor a vow that had begun decades before, by the waters of a familiar river, under the soft glow of an autumn sunset. The morning sun barely filtered through the thin curtains, casting faint lines across the wooden floor. I had woken early, as usual, the quiet of the apartment both comforting and unnerving. Eliza was still asleep, her soft breath steady, yet I felt a storm brewing inside me. Not the storm of anger, but of uncertainty, questions I didn't yet know how to voice. 35 years had passed since that promise, and suddenly the world seemed determined to test its strength. Breakfast was quiet, the clink of spoons against plates echoing louder than usual. Eliza, still half drowsy, smiled faintly, her hair messy from sleep. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Yes," I replied, trying to sound normal, but normal felt impossible. I remembered our long letters, the nights spent talking over crackling phone lines, the shared dreams of a life together. And yet, here we were, in the same city, in the same space, but the invisible walls of time and experience separated us more than the miles ever could. We tried to shake off the tension with small talk, visiting familiar spots downtown, our favorite cafe, the old bookstore where I had first bought her a gift, a hand-bound journal she had adored. But something had shifted. Her smile seemed lighter, almost fleeting, as if hiding thoughts she didn't wish to share. I sensed hesitation, a barrier I hadn't anticipated. Then one evening, the first real disagreement erupted. A trivial matter, really, a miscommunication about a dinner plan, but it spiraled. Eliza had received a letter from her father, asking her to visit Maine urgently. She insisted she had to leave immediately, but I had envisioned us spending a week together, reconnecting, reclaiming what we had lost. "Why now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "We finally have time. Why do you keep running away?" Her eyes flashed with frustration, a look I had rarely seen. "I told you, my father needs me. You don't understand." "I do understand," I snapped, my own emotions rising. "I waited 35 years for this moment, and now every time we're close you pull away." The silence that followed was deafening. Neither of us moved, the tension wrapping around us like the shadows in the room. I could feel her struggle, the same struggle I had faced countless nights alone, wondering if the promise we made could survive the real world. It wasn't just distance that had changed us. It was the weight of responsibility, the passage of time, the lives we had each lived separately. And yet, despite the hurt, despite the anger, a part of me clung desperately to the vow, the memory of youthful devotion that had never truly faded. Over the next few days, we avoided the subject, walking side by side in silence more often than we spoke. But the storm inside me refused to die down. I remembered our first meeting by the river, the long walks along the lake, the promises whispered under the autumn sky. How could something so sacred be tested by letters, duties, and the unpredictable twists of life? One rainy night, as the droplets tapped rhythmically against the window, Eliza finally spoke. "I know I've been distant," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just life, Monica. It's complicated." I nodded, understanding, but my heart still throbbed with the ache of waiting, the pain of longing that 35 years had not dulled. "I know," I whispered, "and I forgive you. But we need to face these challenges together, not let them push us apart." We spent that night talking, truly talking, for the first time in days. Not about trivial plans or fleeting moments, but about our fears, our dreams, the lives we had lived apart, and the commitment that still bound us. Slowly, the storm inside us began to calm, replaced by a fragile understanding, a truce forged not from ease but from the enduring strength of love and memory. Yet even as we held each other, the shadow of doubt lingered. Could promises made in youth survive the trials of adulthood? Could love, tested by time, distance, and life's relentless demands, remain unbroken? We didn't know the answer yet, and so the first real storm passed, not with a bang, but with a quiet acknowledgement of our vulnerability. We had survived the initial misunderstandings, but we knew more challenges awaited. The path ahead would not be easy, yet the promise that had carried us through decades of separation now glowed brighter, a beacon in the uncertain night. As we fell asleep that night, side by side, I whispered to myself, no matter what comes, we endure, we fight, we keep the promise. And Eliza, perhaps sensing my resolve, squeezed my hand gently, her eyes closed, a silent agreement that we were in this together, for better or worse, through the storms and the calm. The city lights flickered across the river as Monica walked along the familiar pier, the scent of rain still lingering in the air. 35 years had carved deep lines on her face, but her eyes carried the same fire, the same memory of love that had withstood decades of trials. Eliza was beside her, holding her hand, their fingers interlaced as if no time had passed at all. Memories flooded back, those days of promises whispered under autumn skies, the long letters that crossed oceans, and the misunderstandings that had threatened to tear them apart. The storm they had faced in part 3 had left scars, yes, but also a clarity. Love could endure, but only if nurtured, protected, and defended against life's unpredictability. They stopped at the old cafe by the lakeside, the place where Monica had first told Eliza that she couldn't imagine a life without her. It was quiet now, a soft lull that allowed them to speak freely. "I never thought we'd get here," Monica admitted, her voice low but steady. "All those years, all the distance, all the fights. Sometimes I thought we'd lost it forever." Eliza's gaze was tender, filled with both sorrow and relief. "I felt the same," she said, "but we kept our promise. Somehow we found our way back, despite everything." For the next hour they spoke about their lives, their choices, and the small regrets that came with age. Yet with every word, laughter returned, mingled with tears, a testament to the resilience of a love long tested. By evening, the sky had turned shades of pink and orange. Monica turned to Eliza and said, "Promise me something. No matter what happens from here, we hold on to this. Always." Eliza nodded, squeezing her hand. Always. And in that moment, the weight of decades seemed to lift. They had endured misunderstandings, distance, and life's relentless pace, yet their bond remained unbroken. Monica realized that the promise wasn't about youth or letters or even grand gestures. It was about persistence, trust, and unwavering commitment. Years later, sitting in their cozy home filled with memories, they would often look at each other and smile, silently acknowledging the trials they had faced. The love that had started as a youthful vow had matured into a steadfast connection, one that no storm could ever truly erase. In those quiet moments, Monica understood the ultimate lesson. Some promises aren't just words, they are lifelines, carrying the weight of time, trials, and unspoken devotion. She had waited, she had fought, and she had finally witnessed the fruition of a lifetime's worth of hope. And as the sun set, they held each other close, hearts full, finally at peace with the journey that had taken them from letters and longing to the enduring embrace of shared life. If you felt the journey of Monica and Eliza's love, don't forget to like and subscribe for more heart-touching stories from the past. Your support keeps these stories alive.